Hi, welcome to another Bowtie Tuesday. Today, we bring you part two of my conversation with Shannon Dowling, Principal of Learning Environment Strategy and Design at Ayers Saint Gross. Last week, we had the pleasure of busting through some common design misconceptions. This week, let's get into the topic of post occupancy evaluations. Thanks for tuning in. Shannon, I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks for having me. I also feel like I need to apologize to Erin for living with a house full of boys and not having a bow tie.
Yeah, it's okay.
And
I
that,
don't. My next question, I think, is a little comical, but we're going to go with it. So, higher ed usually talks about space analytics in the terms of efficiency or cost savings. What's a more meaningful purpose for analytics that the sector is overlooking?
and I bet you can guess my answer here. I would say belonging, retention, student success. So I think space data can give us foresight into lived experiences and how they form communities, how they foster belonging, and how they help people thrive in a space.
Yes, absolutely. And that's so one of the pieces that we've tried to develop is this belonging metric, if you will. How
Mhm.
often is someone returning to a space, and that can have multiple uses, thinking about from a workplace perspective, but from students, understanding, yes, this is the classroom proper, but where are they going beforehand?
Mhm.
How often are they returning to those spaces? And so I think that there's a way to use quantitative data for a qualitative metric. So to that end, I've got to ask, as even though this will maybe hurt my heart, so can you share an example of where space efficiency metrics pointed in one direction, but your design intuition or student behavior, the interviews, told a completely different story?
Yeah, and I think we see this a lot. We see these rooms with this perfect utilization, right? They have high weekly room hours, they have high seat fill rates, but students never return to that space outside the classroom. And that's what you would get from occupancy data. So everything in these sort of calculated analytics is going, yes, this room is working. And then everything in the occupancy analytics and in the behavior of the students is saying, like, no, something is off here. And I think we often, we know that a lot of faculty members have a choice in where they teach, and their choices aren't necessarily always about the affordances of the space. Students don't really have that same choice in where they learn,
Mhm.
but they have where they learn in terms of like scheduled instructional environments, but they do have that choice in where they learn when there is no schedule and there's something dictating them. And so, students are going to follow comfort, they're going to follow safety, they're going to follow social cues. So I think sometimes understanding that data that's not on the fixed schedule would help us more than understanding the data that is fixed.
Absolutely, 100% agree. So putting our future hat on, so we talked about how the student demographic, the financial picture is changing, but also thinking about, we're going to see more students that did a lot of learning virtually during the pandemic. They're going to start arriving to our campuses. So, what expectations or behavior should institutions be designing for now rather than in the next 5 years?
Yeah, it's like I feel like every answer I say, you're just ready for it, right? Because but I feel like students are already signaling the fact that they expect agency, choice,
Mm.
and autonomy in how they manage their environment. And we've actually been doing a lot of, for a system-wide classroom study, we've been doing a lot of engagement, and we were offering the students, would you rather have consistency or choice? And like 95+% of the students said they want choice. And so I think like we can think about micro adjustability over environments, like, can you add a lamp that can be dimmed? Can you be able to move a screen or a monitor? Can you give students permission to actually rearrange the furniture in their lounge space after hours? And these small like interventions that we can make will have an outsized psychological impact on students. I think another thing that we can do right now is de-densify spaces.
Mm.
And you know that from your work as well. Like you can often take away like 10 to 15% of the seats in a space, and students will feel less cramped, and they'll just be able to be more comfortable. It's like, putting on the elastic pants for Thanksgiving dinner.
That's
Um, and then it's also adding spaces for quiet, like low stimulus, low pressure spaces, spaces where people can regulate, where, noise, movement, clutter can all be minimized. And then I think the other thing that we talk about a lot is hybrid fluidity and just making, we know that even if part of our day is in person, not all of our day is going to be in person. So adding places for privacy, for that
mhm.
have good power and good acoustic control, and that you can kind of quickly plug and play and adapt into the in-person environment, I think is really helpful for students as well, and for everyone, I guess.
Right. I was like, I know we're talking specifically about students, but I'm like, this is describing faculty, staff, visitors to campus, all of us. So, absolutely. So, wanted to maybe kind of switch a bit to something that we're particularly interested about. What does the future look like? So, traditional post occupancy evaluations have relied on surveys and snapshots in time. What does a next gen POE look like if you could redesign it from scratch?
Yes, and I've been trying to do this, so I was very excited about this question. I think we're doing occupancy surveys very wrong. We're focusing, at least in the design world, we focus on these affordances. Like, did you use the whiteboard? Did you
Mhm.
like the furniture? And those questions don't tell us really like what matters. And that's like, did adding this space or did renovating the space actually change anything? We're not really measuring impact at that point. We're measuring features. And what I personally really want to look at is belonging, retention, academic confidence, attendance, faculty teaching behaviors, collaboration, and whether, a space really did relieve utilization pressure. So, like, did the building work the way that we said it would? And, did it solve the problem? And I think in order to do that, then the occupancy survey has to be multi-method, it has to be longitudinal, it has to blend occupancy analyticals with behavioral observations, like quick pulse surveys, different environmental data, overlaying some narrative reflections and some like long-term student success metrics so that we know like the place that we designed is really actually helping people thrive. And I think we have a lot of work to do in that arena.
Yes, lots of opportunity. And, so I'm curious. So I think typically a POE is 1 year, after occupying the building. In this world that you've described, well, I mean, I think you touched on something that's really interesting of how can we maybe quantify quick wins? Because we know that the world we live in, we're not, yes, capital planning is a long term effort, but we're constantly developing new plans or figuring out what's the next build or renovation, what's our priority. So what I really liked about what you said is, how can we get something in that interim period, but then still measure long term for that impact. So I think it's kind of, to me, what I'm hearing is we need both. We need
Yeah.
that quick win of like, okay, this design decision worked, it did not work, so that we can adjust. Because going back to earlier, it's not just about the building, it's not just about the space, it's how we operate. So, do we need to maybe think differently about how we're training faculty to be successful in these spaces? So, I think it's just, there's, like you said, so much that needs to be done, which is the exciting part, because it hasn't been carved out for us as an industry. So, kind of to wrap us up, again, this promise is not a leading question, but I really would love to see your perspective. What do you see as the biggest opportunities for design teams in analytics platforms like Campus IQ to collaborate in ways that genuinely improve the student experience and future campus planning?
Yeah, and I feel like this is a little bit of my soapbox right now, but I feel like that the biggest opportunity isn't technical, but it's cultural. I feel like we're really bad at like guarding our secrets. Like designers guard the process and analytics team guard the algorithms, institutions guard their data. But I feel like the student experience would improve if we did the opposite.
Mhm.
If we share frameworks, if we co-interpret patterns together, if we combine the student narrative with these behavioral signals, like get everything out from behind a paywall, and we collaborate around like open insight, non-proprietary tools, and just think about like what questions are we trying to answer together, and how will we know when that space is helping students thrive?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think for almost I think the entire time I've known you, I know that's your approach of we're all, trying to solve the same problems and ultimately have the same impact on students and the people who are serving them in those buildings. And so we'll probably drop some links in this post, but you practice what you preach. Thinking about the playbook, the learning spaces, education series. Yeah, so we'll drop those links in just to share with our viewers. But anything else that you would want to address?
No, I think that's good.
Okay.
That's good.
Thank you for joining us today for part 2 of my conversation with Shannon. I so appreciated her insights into the future of post-occupancy evaluations and how occupancy analytics can inform design. Thanks for tuning in.